invitation. Only one of you has to share it.
Yeah. So hold
All
on.
right, I got that. I'm not gonna be doing anything. Kevin's
Yeah.
here just to record, and I'm just gonna be here just to moderate anything. If you see anything suspicious or if they're bothering you, I'll just kick them out. But
All right.
I don't think we're gonna do anything.
Mm-hmm.
All right, just let me know.
Okay.
Don't start now. Just wait a little
Yeah.
bit.
All right.
I'll tell you when you can start.
Okay.
You guys can start at 9:03 or 9:04.
Mm-hmm.
All right, I don't think anyone else is gonna join. You guys can go ahead.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, people are coming. Never mind.
Okay. All right. Should we start or should we wait a little bit?
Someone just joined. I want to say
Yeah.
9:05 just to be
Okay.
safe.
Mm-hmm.
I'm surprised it's this low. Maybe it's late at night.
Yeah, that's definitely why.
How's your day, Sean?
Pretty good. How's yours?
Good. I was just balling with the boys.
I good
uh,
stuff.
someone just took Arjun's phone, and
Really? Just
so,
like a random guy?
some of those you know those kids that always show up and they take up like half the
Oh,
court.
yeah.
So they took Art and they went to Carlisle, and then
Oh,
they threw his phone out the in the woods and they took his case.
well,
So poor guy had to go to Carlisle to get his phone.
oh my god. Gee.
Yeah.
That's actually so tough.
Got corona in the process.
Hopefully not.
Yeah.
Rip.
Uh, mm, uh, all right. Looks like yeah. You
Mm-hmm.
guys can get started. I'll be on mute.
All right.
All right. Go ahead.
Yeah. Okay. So,
All right, so welcome everyone to our workshop. It's gonna be run by me, Soham, and Ishan here, and we're just gonna talk about the basics of HTML and CSS.
what exactly is HTML? As some of you probably know, it stands for Hypertext Markup Language, and it's the standard markup language for web pages. It describes the structure of web pages using markup, meaning certain tags that help the coder understand what exactly is going on. HTML elements are the building blocks of HTML pages because they can't run without them, obviously. And as I said before, they're represented by tags. Some examples of tags that label pieces of content are heading, paragraph, table, and more. And when you're actually looking at a website, the browser doesn't display the tags themselves, but they use them to render the content of the page. So you won't actually be seeing any code on the website. So let's talk about the history of HTML. HTML 2.0, the most recent, the earliest version of HTML was created in 1991 by Sir Tim Berners-Lee. He's the official inventor of HTML, and it was released in 1995. In 1999, HTML 4.01 was created, and it has the main components of HTML that we see today. In 2014, HTML5 was created, and the current version that we use today was released in 2017 and is known as HTML 5.2. So what is CSS? It stands for Cascading Style Sheets, and what it does is it describes the presentation of web pages using elements that HTML cannot, which include colors, layout, and fonts. HTML and CSS go hand in hand when creating a website, and it was created by Haakon William Lee in 1994.
Okay, so in HTML you have elements, which is anything from this first tag all the way down to this last tag. Um, Examples of these elements are the heading tag, the paragraph tag, and the line break tag. A key difference here you see is that for these tags, you have an ending tag that starts with a forward slash, and it has the name of the tag. So in order to close the heading tab, you would have forward slash h1, and so on. But here for the line break tag, you don't have a closing tag. Well, that's because it's an empty element, so it has no content. So there's no need for an end of this tag. And here, this is what a typical HTML document would look like. And we're going to go over what some of these parts actually mean. So first, you have this thing that says exclamation point doc type HTML. It basically declares that hey, this is an HTML5 document. And then you have the HTML opening tag, and down here, all the way at the end of your HTML document, you should have a closing tag for the HTML tag. It basically tells whatever program you're using to write your HTML code, basically tells you that, hey, I'm writing an HTML.
So first off, let's start with the head. So essentially, if you're on a browser, um, most of the time you can tell that when you're looking at the tabs at the top, there's usually some sort of logo or image, and also sort of an explanation or a title of what the website is. Anything that you want to show up there, so like the logo or the title, will go in the head tag. And one example is the title. As I said before, it sort of explains like what exactly your website is about, or say like if you have an article, have like the article title. And to actually put the title in your head, you would type the title tag and then / title tag in the middle of the two head tags. And then next we have the body. Unlike the head and the title tags, these are actually shown like as visible elements in your website itself. And so what you do, just like you do for the head tag, is you do the body tag and then a closing body tag with a /, and then anything in the middle of those two tags will be shown on your website, and we'll explain those in more detail later.
So here, you have a heading tag and a closer for the heading tag, and a pair of paragraph tags. So first up, this heading tag. Basically, H1 defines a large heading, and there are 6 levels of headings, ranging from all the way from H1 to H6. H1 being the highest or most important level. Basically, as you go up from H1 to H6, the size of the heading goes down. So H1 would be, for example, it would be larger than, say, if this was an H2 heading. And then here you have a paragraph tag and a closing paragraph tag. Basically, this defines a paragraph. It creates spacing above that text and below that text by default. Well, and then how do you actually format your text in a paragraph? Well, you have for to bold your text, you have 2 options. You can go for the strong tag or the B tag. The result will be the same. It'll put the text here in bold. But what's the difference? Well, the strong tag, it'll define the text as important. Basically, it's really important when the text is being read by a computer for, say, visually impaired people. It'll add meaning to the text when it's being read out loud. But the B tag, it'll simply just visually make the text bold without adding any meaning. The same goes for italicizing text. You have 2 options again, the emphasize tag, which is EM, and the italicize tag, which is just an I. The result will also be the same. It'll just put the text in here in italics. But the difference is, again, the same. The EM, the emphasize tag, it'll emphasize that text, which means the computer, when it reads out loud that text for visually impaired people, it'll add meaning to the emphasis. But the I tag, it'll only format the text in italics. It won't add any further meaning. So a typical rule of thumb is to use EM and the strong tag to bold and italicize as much as possible.
So now let's talk about links. Links are very important parts of websites because they can help the viewer redirect to some other website or some source that you want to cite. For example, if you're writing an article. So how would you do that? How would you insert a link into your website? You would type bracket A href, which stands for hypertext reference, and then equals, and then your URL in quotation marks. Then what you can see there is link text. So if you don't want your link to just show up on the website, just a plain link, but you want it to show up as some text, then you just type it where you see link text on the slide. For example, we have Ahref, and then W3 schools, and then we wrote. It's a good resource for HTML and CSS. So on your website, this is what it would look like. It wouldn't show the link at all. It would simply show up as the text, and if you click the text, it'll redirect you to W3 schools. And so there's different types of targets. So one of them is a blank target, like you can see in the example, and that opens the link in a new tab if you want to redirect yourself. But if you do underscore self, then it'll open it in the same window. Or if you just leave it blank, it'll still open it in the same window because self is the default. And then now we have images, arguably a more important aspect of a website. And they're very useful because they're good for showing any information that can't be displayed through text. So how do you insert an image? You do bracket img, which stands for image, src, which stands for source. Then you do your URL and quotation marks after an equal sign, just like you did for the links. And so how would you find a URL for an image? Every image has a source URL. Like for example, if you go on Google Images and you simply right click, you can see copy link address. Or if you have a image saved in your on your computer, in the folder it won't be saved as the image itself, but it'll be saved as a link or URL. Next, we have some style options. For example, if you want to change the width or the height of the image, then you would simply change it here, as shown in the example. So, for example, you have 1920 by 1080, which is common dimensions for an image. Also, you could do percent to show how much percent of your screen the image would take up. So this is basically just a summary of everything that we've talked about before, and it's how an HTML document should be structured when you're writing one. Also, keep in mind that only the content in white inside the body will be displayed, as we said before.
And now Bootstrap. Well, in order to write CSS, Bootstrap is actually like really important, really popular for CSS framework. Basically, it's used to develop responsive and mobile phone optimized websites. Basically, on Bootstrap, you'll find many free-to-use HTML and CSS templates for buttons, tables, and typography, and even more. Basically, it's a really good resource for easily finding really great HTML and CSS templates. And when you're writing CSS, basically, as we mentioned before, CSS stands for Cascading Style Sheet. Basically, it adds flavor to your website. Essentially, some common things you'll find in a CSS document is code that changes colors of text, changes fonts of text, and changes the background color of your website. Well, to start off, here we have an example of code that'll change the color. It'll change color of certain text. Here we have inline CSS right here. Basically, that means that this code is still written in CSS, but it's within this h tag, this starting h tag, which means that this code will only affect this hello world text and nothing more. Basically, in order to change the color, you'll go style equals opening quotes, background dash color colon, and then the name of what color you want. Typically, in whatever program you're using to write your code, there should be a color wheel that pops up when you're writing this code that allows you to choose what color you want. But if that doesn't work, you should be able to do a quick Google search, for example, CSS colors or something like that, to find what the name of the color you want. Next, how would you change the font of certain text? Well, this code, both these code right here, these codes. This is internal or external CSS depending on how you would how you have your HTML and CSS documents linked. But in order to change the font of a text, you would go dot serif, opening parentheses, and there should be a closing parentheses here too. They must be curly brackets. You'd go font dash family and then Times New Roman, and then this is just an example of a font. In order to find other fonts, there are other really good sources out there. For example, we briefly mentioned W3 Schools. They have a good set of other fonts that you can easily access and use. And to change the background color of your website, you would go body, opening curly brackets, background dash color, and then here, the same thing as up here, you'll come up with a color wheel, or you can do a quick Google search of what color you want. And just a reminder to remember to format your CSS correctly. So if you're creating a new CSS page, remember to use this type of CSS, this internal or external CSS, depending on if you want your CSS page linked or if you want your CSS written somewhere else. And make sure you have if you want internal inline CSS, sorry, not internal, inline CSS, make sure you format that correctly. Well, most websites, there's no just one page. Most websites have multi pages, right? But how would you go about making those?
So now we're going to talk about lists. There's different types of lists, which I'll go over in a second. But essentially, what is a list? It's a way of keeping different types of text, whether related or not, organized in your website so it doesn't become all over the place. So one type of list that you can have is an unordered list. And so to make an unordered list, you do bracket UL and then bracket, and then the same thing with the forward slash at the end. And everything they have in the middle will be part of your list. But if you want to actually be organized, you do bracket li and then your text for the list and then a forward slash. And then what you can do is you can do that on the next line and not in the line after. And you can have an infinite list if even if you want, but you can make it as long as you want. Is basically what I'm trying to say. And then the next thing we have is an ordered list. Instead of doing ul like we have in the example, you'd simply type ol. So what exactly is the difference between an unordered and an ordered list? In an unordered list, like one of the more common lists that you probably see, it's simply shown using bullet points. Whereas in an ordered list, it's shown using the 1, 2, 3 ABCD method, such as if you're writing an outline. If you guys want to know more about CSS for lists and how to format them, then you guys can check out the link done in W3 Schools called CSS_list. All right. So next we're going to talk about navigation bars. You've probably seen navigation bars in any sort of website that you go to help you redirect to certain parts of the website, so you don't have to keep on scrolling until you find what you need. And to actually create a navigation bar, you would simply type the code that's shown on the left. So UL curly bracket list style type none margin 0 padding 0, and then another curly bracket. So essentially, what this means is well, navigation bars are essentially just lists of links that redirect you to certain parts of the website, like I said before. But to actually create a navigation bar, you wouldn't make it just like a list. You would have to remove all the bullets that you have, such as in an unordered list, any margins or any padding. So to make sure that you do that, you simply type list style type none for no types of like bullets or 1, 2, 3 ABC, no margins, and also no padding. All right, now finally for our slideshow, we're going to be talking about the orientation of navigation bars. For example, you guys have probably seen navigation bars on the top of a website, but you've probably also seen them on the left or right. To change these, for example, to do vertical orientations, you do display block in CSS, and that makes the entire area on your navigation bar and the text there clickable. Then, like you do for the image, you do width in pixels. Otherwise, it's just going to take up your entire screen, which you don't want, obviously. And then again for CSS, you do the background color. You try and make your navigation bar stand out so people can have a better experience while viewing your web page. Also, make sure you don't make it the same color as the background of your entire website, or else they won't be able to find it. To do a horizontal orientation, you do display inline. And here's another example for a, yeah. So here's another example. As you saw in my last slide, you do list style type none, margin 0, padding 0. And then as I said before, the width would be, for example, 60 pixels. And then what you could do is block display, and then you could choose your background color in hex code.
Essentially, a horizontal oriented navigation bar is the same exact thing as a vertical orientation bar, but with this additional code.
All right, thank you guys so much for viewing our slideshow. I hope we taught you some more about the basics of HTML and CSS. And me and Soham wish you guys good luck on your coding endeavors. And hopefully you guys can make a website or something with using your skills that you've learned to help you guys out.
And these are some really good resources for additional HTML and CSS topics because our presentation only has scratched the surface. If you want your website to look even more fancy, more even better, we highly suggest that you check these links out.
Awesome. Thank you, Soham and Ishan. Does anyone have any questions for them? All right. Well, I think Soham and Ishan are on the Slack. And if you have any questions that pop up, feel free to reach out to them. And yeah, that's it. So thank you for everyone coming, and have a good night. Thank you, Kylie.
Thank you.
All right. So yeah, good job, guys.
Yep.
Yeah, I think we're the only ones here left. So
Yeah.
all right, I'm gonna end it. But yeah,
Okay.
thank you,
All right.
guys. See
See
you
ya.
guys.